In this session, we're going to take our first look at InfraWorks 360. This tool can be used for conceptual design and creating visualizations of a proposed project. On my screen is an example of an InfraWorks model. As I orbit this around, we can see this is a 3D model, fully rendered, of a proposed overpass. This would be the type of thing that you could take to a public meeting to gain support for a project. This could be something that you could share with stakeholders to show the intent of a proposed design. Likewise, this design can also be edited on the fly, so as you're having a meeting with a potential stakeholder or owner, we can take and make changes to this model almost as quickly as you can edit using a napkin sketch. So at first glance, when people see a model like this, they think it may take a long time to create because it is in 3D. Historically, generating a model like this using Civil 3D or inroads would require creating alignments and profiles and assemblies and daylight tie-ins and intersections, materials and light sources. You know, at the beginning of a project in the conceptual stages, it was cost prohibitive to build something 3D. Using InfraWorks 360, it's now very easy. We can build a model like this in less than a half hour. So what I'd like to do in this session is essentially show you that. We're going to build this model in real time so you can see exactly how it's created. I'm going to start by jumping back out to the home screen, and when we build a model, we can build it two different ways. It just depends on what we have for data. InfraWorks 360 is essentially a GIS application, so I have to ask myself, do I have data that I can incorporate into my model right now or not? If I don't, I can have InfraWorks go out and scan the internet and accumulate data for me, free of charge. We're going to build the model both ways. I'm going to start by just going to Model Builder. Let's say I'd like to build a model in the Salt Lake City, Utah area. I'll just start typing Salt Lake City. That's good enough. Let me click. It takes me right to that area. I've got a nice map view here. I can choose the area of interest. Let me zoom in. We'll pan this over, and I'm going to create a quick model here. I'll just click the rectangle button, and then I will click and hold and define a rectangle. We can build a model up to 200 square kilometers. So we'll go this much for right now, just as an example. Model name, I'll call this Utah Sample. And I'm going to save this in my default group, and I'll go ahead and click Create Model. That's it. InfraWorks is going out to the internet. It's locating the GIS assets that it can find for that area, and it's going to assemble those and build a model for me. Usually takes about 10 minutes. While it's doing that, we will build a model from scratch. Let me go ahead and close this. To build a brand new model, I'm just going to come up and click New, and I'm going to call this Fayetteville Model. I'm building this from data that I extracted from the internet. We'll define a model extent. I'll load the extent from a file. What I'm doing here is grabbing a shape file. It's just a simple rectangle that's going to define the boundary of my model. After I do that, let me go to Advanced Settings, and I'm going to choose the coordinate system that I would like to use. Let me click the globe here. Really easy. I'd like to go with USA, Arkansas. And I'm going to use this coordinate system, AR83 North Zone Foot. We'll assign that, and I'll click OK. Now that I've done that, InfraWorks is building a SQL-like database, and it's going to define the boundary of my model based on that rectangle that I pre-inserted. Now, we don't have to have a boundary right off the bat. We can start inputting data into this model and clip it later. So here's my boundary. I'm going to start inserting data now. Let me bring up Windows Explorer. I've got a folder here. Let me go into City of Fayetteville, and you can see all the directories I created. As I accumulated information online, I stored it in these folders just to make it a little easier organization-wise, so I know where everything is. I'm going to start with the elevation folder. Here I've got a geotiff. I'm going to add this to my model just by dragging it and dropping it. And as soon as I drop it in, InfraWorks recognizes what that is. It's terrain. I'm just going to choose Close and Refresh. It is now taking this data and it's incorporating it into the SQL-like database, and as soon as it's finished loading, we'll actually see the elevations in my model. As this comes in, I can zoom in, we'll orbit this around, and we can see the relief. I'm going to go back to a home view. Let's insert some additional data. Once again, I'll go back to Windows Explorer, and I'll go into my City of Fayetteville folder. Let's go to the imagery directory. Here I have a Mr. Sid image. If I hover over this, we can see it's almost 900 meg. Let me take and drag this in and drop it into my model. We'll make this a little easier to see. InfraWorks recognizes this is ground imagery. The coordinate system was not in this file, so I'm going to choose the coordinate system that I exported that data to. It happens to be Arkansas and 883 North Foot. Let me choose close and refresh. Same as before, InfraWorks is now incorporating this Mr. Sid image into the SQLite database, and in just a moment we will see the aerial photography mapped on top of our terrain. As this is coming in, we can talk about some of the other data that we can incorporate into an InfraWorks model. I can bring in images, obviously. I can bring in terrain, DEM, land XML. I can bring in shapefiles. Most DOTs, most cities have a large library of GIS data. All of that information can be incorporated into an InfraWorks model. We can also bring in SketchUp content. If there are signature buildings in your area, you can take and extract those from the Trimble warehouse. We can drop those models or any of that 3D content into InfraWorks. We can bring in SDF, that's an Autodesk GIS format. We can bring in DGN files. We can bring in DWG as well. We can bring content directly from applications like Civil 3D or 3ds Max or Revit. Now that my aerial photo is here, let me zoom in. And as I orbit this around, we can see how that photo is mapped nicely on the terrain. Once again, I'm going to go back to a home view, and let's insert a shapefile. I'll go back to Windows Explorer, we'll back up a directory, and I'm going to jump in this folder called Water. Here's a shapefile called Ponds. I'll just drag that in. When I do, InfraWorks just needs to know what this shapefile represents. I'm going to say it's a water area. And then if I click the pencil here, I can choose how I want this water stylized. I'm just going to choose default water there. I'll choose close and refresh, and that will drop the shapefile in. Let me zoom in as this is regenning, and I'll orbit this around, and you can see that we've got some really nice water. When you're working in InfraWorks, it's a lot like you're working in a gaming environment. The InfraWorks engine that models what we see on screen is essentially a gaming engine. Same principle. So the objects are rendered all the time. Let me drag this over. There's an overpass right here. I just want to show you something. You can see the shapefile data is a little bit older than the aerial photo that we have. Not a problem. If I click this unnecessary pond here, I can just delete that. That did not affect the attached shapefile. All I did was take the data that I brought in and I just removed that one piece from my SQLite database. Now that I have my water, let's add some buildings. I'm going to zoom in on this office complex area here in the southwest, and we'll go back to Windows Explorer. Let me back up a directory. We'll go to Buildings, and I'm going to take this buildings shapefile. Let me just drag this in, drop it. As I drop these in, you can see over on the right there's a data sources panel. You can see how those items are starting to stack up here, so I can keep track of them after they've been inserted. Let me tell InfraWorks what this is. These are buildings. And now that I've identified what the object is, you can see that there's several settings here that are applicable to buildings. Right now I can see that if I was to do nothing, if I was just to click close and refresh, every building that would go in here would be 33 feet tall. If I open the menu here, here's where I can see all of the columns that are in that shapefile. So if I had data in that shapefile that represented the roof heights, I could set those automatically just by mapping those to the settings that we have here. What we really do here when we're picking from those columns is we're generating a script behind the scenes. You can see if I go to the script tab here, we can see the script that's being created. Right now everything is based on random colors, random heights. What I'm going to do, let me go back to Windows Explorer quickly, and in the buildings folder here I'm going to open up the script directory. Let me double click. In here I've got a script file. Let me copy this to my clipboard, and just to make things real quick, I will paste that script right here, and I'll choose close and refresh. And let's zoom in. This is just a shapefile of building footprints. That's all it was. And what InfraWorks did with that script file is it randomized my heights, my facades, my roof slopes, and you can see I've got buildings for the entire community. And just by randomizing those, it gives me a much more natural look, at least for the buildings that are in the background. If I was doing some work in this area, I would probably go through and adjust my facades and heights so these buildings were a little more accurate for the surrounding area. That being said, I can tweak these. If I click this, I can pull this building up and change its height. We could change things like rotation. I can change the roof slope. If I just right click and go to properties here, we can see the properties of this object. I'm going to change the roof slope to maybe 25, and when I click update, we'll see that change on screen. Let's drop some more data in. I'm just going to tip this up. We'll put in some streets this time. Going to go back to Windows Explorer. go into my Fayetteville directory and I'll jump into the transportation folder. I'm going to use a script in this case as well, so as long as I'm here, I'll take and copy this to my clipboard, and I'm going to drag and drop this shapefile in. We'll tell InfraWorks what this is. These are roads, and you can see settings that are applicable to roads. This is based on the schema that's in the SQLite database. That being said, you can take and apply your own schema if you'd like to maintain your own attributes in addition to what we get out of the box with InfraWorks. We'll look at that in a future video. For right now, we can see there's settings for lanes forward, lanes back. If I was to do nothing, same as before, if I click the pencil here, I could pick one style and all the roads will have that style. Instead, I'm going to go to the script tab. I'll click edit here and we'll paste my script. There is attribute data in this shapefile that can be used to identify the number of lanes and the style to be used for the roads. So this way I can go right from a shapefile and I can have these stylized nicely. We can see the difference in the appearance of the roads. We have got the appropriate number of lanes now. Now it's not perfect in every case. I mean, it's dependent on the information in your GIS data. I can see there's an issue here. Let me select this road and I'm going to go over to properties just like we did with the building. And I'm going to change the lanes forward and lanes back to 2, and I'll click update. You can see how quickly that changes. Let me select this road. Notice these grips. InfraWorks is very easy to edit. If I click that grip and pull this road out, we can see that very easy to adjust. I can pull this back over and snap it to that road, and it creates a nice clean intersection. This is where I was saying you could edit a design at a meeting. You know, just sitting around a conference room table, you can have InfraWorks open and be changing a model on the fly. Let's change the appearance of the road. I'm going to bring up my style palette. This shows us all of the objects that there are in InfraWorks. For instance, I'm going to come down to road. These are all of the styles. Let me drag down to the bottom. I'm going to take one of these styles called sidewalks with the street lights. Let me just drag and drop that. As fast as I drop that, you can see how quickly that changes in the model. Let's back up. This road's not bad. The lanes are correct, but in real life, we can see from the aerial photo there, it's much wider. There's actually a median in here. Let me drag my style palette up, and I'm going to drag over this style called Boulevard with Fall Hardwood. This has a median. We'll drag it over and drop it on this one as well. So you can see we're getting closer. To get this right on the money, it's just going to be a matter of going in and editing that style and adjusting the lane widths and the median widths and the width between the sidewalk and the back at curb to get that to where it's exactly where we need it to be. So once again, very quick edits we can make to our model. Let's pan this up. There's an interchange right here. Let me zoom in. Right here we can see in the aerial photo there's a shadow. That's because this is a bridge. If I orbit this up, we can see that the GIS roads that came in are being draped across the surface, and they tie up nicely, but in this case this actually should be a bridge. Let's look at how we can make that adjustment. I'm going to select the road, and I'm just going to use the split feature option. Let's pan this down, and I'll click this side, and we'll split feature. So I've just separated this piece of road, and let me orbit this up, and when I do, notice how the grips change. We've seen how we can drag them horizontal. If I tip this up, now these grips become elevational. I can grab these and pull them up and change the elevation of the road. Let me pull up this one. Let's orbit this around. We'll kind of level this off just a touch. Let's pull this one down. That's pretty good. We can see that as that came up, it automatically lifted off the other road and became an overpass. Now, I'd like this to look more like a bridge. I'm just going to drop another style on it. Let me go into the interstate folder, and I'll take this style called Bridge General. I'll just drag and drop this on my road, and we can see now this looks like a bridge. Only issue I have is with this particular style, one of my peers is encroaching on the road below. Not a problem. I can fix this by editing the style. That style's selected. Let me just come down and click the edit button. And once again, I apologize for my screen size. This is a big dialog box. Pier spacing, we can see that's 82 feet. I'm going to change this to 100. I'll press enter, and then I'll drag this up, and I'll come down and click the OK button, which is off screen. when the style updates, we can see how those piers look a little bit better for our existing situation. Let's close up some of these dialog boxes so we have a little more real estate. So using some of the concepts that we've just seen, we could go through and very quickly create an existing conditions model just from GIS data that we already have. Once we have our existing conditions, now we're ready where we can take and create a proposed overpass, maybe different variations, version 1, version 2, different alternates. I'm going to come up to the top and open this proposal menu. The master proposal represents my existing conditions model. I'm going to choose create new proposal. I'll call this overpass version 1 and I'll click OK. This allows me to create my different variations. The overpass version 1, anything I add to this is going to have everything that the master model has plus the new stuff. So it's only saving the delta. This way I don't have to create several copies of my model. And if I'm working on version 1 and I want to create version 2, I can go back to the master. Going back to master cleans it all off. Start a new proposal and I can start my second variation. And then I can go through and easily show the different variations just by selecting the proposal that I'd like to view on screen. So overpass version 1 is up. Let's take a look at the overpass we are going to create. I'm going to go to Windows Explorer here quickly, and inside my folder there's a design folder. Let's go to project plans, and I'm going to open up this TIFF image. Let's just open that with Paint for right now. We'll back this up. This is very similar to what historically we would take to a public meeting. You can see the linear reference of how this overpass is going to be used to allow the traffic heading north on North College Avenue, allows them to exit and get onto the Highway 71 without having to drive all the way down, loop around and come back way north here. It's just a time-saving alignment. So we're going to take this exhibit and use it to build our new 3D model. Let me close this. I'm going to drag the TIFF image, drop it into my model, and then I'll come down and click close and refresh. When I do, we'll see that pop in. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I took that image and I dragged it into Civil 3D and I exported it with a world file. So this way I can drag it in and now I can just take and trace right over the top of it. I'm going to come over to my design menu. We'll click design roadways and I'm just going to choose a local road here and a style. I'll pick to start my road, and then I will pick a PI location on screen, and you can see as I move this, it's putting a horizontal curve in there. This curve is applicable to its AASHTO standards based on the speed limit of my current road. So what I'm drawing here, if I set my desired speed, the geometry that it creates is going to be legitimate for that speed. That being said, I can always change this later. Now I'm coming down, we'll pick maybe the PIs right around there. I can change these as well. It's grips. You know, we can edit this later. Let me click here. I'll add another PI location there, and then I'll come back and I'll double click to tie into that existing road. Let me press escape. We'll pan this over and take a look at what we have. Not too bad. I can click the road and you can see the grip for the PI. I can see the grip for the horizontal curve. Now I could enter a numeric value in there. Looks like 350 would work very well. If I just click this button, I could set that right to 350 if I wanted to use nice even numbers. Let's orbit this around. Likewise, we can click the PI here. Maybe we'll pull this over a touch. And we can also adjust the horizontal curves just by dragging the PC or the PT grips. That's not too bad. We'll get it close for right now. So I've got my horizontal geometry laid out. As I swing this around, we can see it's not elevated. It's taking and passing through some of these roads. If I tip this up, since this is a design road, this has legitimate horizontal and vertical geometry. There's a PVI right here. Let me click and I'll pull the PVI up. When I release, we can see that it is creating my elevation. Let's bring this over. I'm going to just right click here and I'll add another PVI at this location. So I can add PVIs in the plan view. Let's take and pull this one down. some curve on that. I'll make it a little bit lower. That's good for right now. Let's orbit this around. Maybe I'd like to add another PVI. I'm going to shorten up this curve for right now, just to give myself some room. If I click these PVIs, I can slide them back and forth along the profile as well. Let me right click and I'll add another PVI here, just to maintain my elevation. Let me pull this up. We'll extend the vertical curve. Now I'm just dragging for the vertical curve. I'm doing this conceptual, but if I click here, we can see the station, the elevation, the grade in and grade out. If I click the PC or PT of the vertical curve, here's where I can take and enter a numeric value. So just doing this conceptual for right now. Let me orbit this around. I'm going to take this PVI and I'll slide it over. And we'll push it up just a touch. So that's not bad for right now. If once I lay this out, we've been doing all of our work in the plan view. If I come down and click the review button, I can choose profile view and I can see the profile of this bridge right here. The green line represents the existing ground. This black line represents the profile of my bridge, and I can see the PVI locations. In fact, if I hover over these, you can see those highlight in the drawing, so you can easily tell which one's which. And we can edit the PVI locations and elevations here as well. As soon as I tip that up, you can see that change in the drawing. Let's close the profile view. We'll orbit this around and we'll say conceptually that looks pretty good for my elevation. Next, I'm going to right click on this road and I'll say I'd like to add bridge. I'd like my bridge to start right about here, and then I'll come down and I'd like the bridge to end right here. Let's zoom in and take a look. I'm going to close the asset card. As we orbit this around, the initial bridge that it created is precast concrete. I can change that if I click the bridge here. Let's bring up the asset card for the bridge. I'm going to change the type to steel plate. That will change the composition of the bridge. It will also change the piers. I'm now seeing the appropriate number of piers that I would need for a steel bridge. This looks pretty good. Let me click this pier down in the end. I'm going to rotate it so that it's parallel to my road. Now as I rotate, when I release watch, it'll change. You can see that it will automatically adjust its properties to be appropriate for that rotation. Let's rotate this one as well. Let's pan this over. That one looks good. We can also use that top grip to slide them back and forth. So from a preliminary perspective, that looks pretty good. Let's make this bridge area, this overpass, look like a bridge. Right now it's still using the same style. I'm going to just add a style zone here. Let me open up the asset card. I'll go to style, and I'm going to create a new style zone. We'll use that same bridge style that we used for the other overpass here. And I'd like that style to start right here at the beginning of the bridge, and we'll take that down to the end. Okay, that looks very good. This will work right now for our exhibit. I'm going to take and hide this photo. Let me just come back to my main menu here and I'll go to surface layers. We'll just turn that original printed exhibit off. We'll keep it in the model, but we'll turn it off so it's hidden. There we go. We've got a nice 3D example of this. Let's add just a couple more things just so I can show you. I mean, InfraWorks is not just all about roads. If I go on the main menu here to the create menu, I can create barriers and buildings and city furniture. This would be people, vehicles, light poles, street signs. I can create coverages. This is how I can take and create areas where I'm hiding part of the aerial photo in places where I've made significant changes. I can put in utilities, pipes and structures. I can put in trees and water areas. Let me choose water areas for a second. Let's put a conceptual pond right here. Okay, let's take and add some trees. I'm just going to pan this back. I can see in the existing aerial photo here I have some trees. I'm just going to choose a stand of trees. I'll pick the tree I'd like to use. And then I'll just quickly define my boundary. We'll orbit this up. And now I can adjust the frequency of those trees, more or fewer, just by dragging the slider. I can use this arrow to increase their height. You know, from a preliminary conceptual point of view, maybe now that a new overpass is coming in, we might want to create a row of trees here just as a visual buffer for these buildings. I'm going to create that quickly. We'll just drag those up. Let's add a vehicle. To do that, I'll go to City Furniture, and their very large library of content that comes right out of the box. You can also make your own content using SketchUp models or just 3D solids, anything that you can define in 3D for the most part. If it's a industry standard file format, there's a good chance we can take and bring it right into InfraWorks. We place this car. If I wanted to place additional cars, I could just Control C, copy that to my clipboard, and then I can Control V, and you can see as I move the car, it's going to take and follow the terrain. Let's place another one right here. We'll take and orbit this around so it better matches the road. So in just a matter of minutes, I was able to take existing GIS data that I already had, stuff that I had accumulated online, and put together a fairly comprehensive, realistic looking model that I could take to a public meeting. Just a couple seconds ago, we had InfraWorks go out and generate some data for a model for Salt Lake City, Utah. Let's see what it did for us. I am going to jump back out to the home screen, and I can see that model's finished. Okay, now I have my email closed. If my email was up, it would have sent me an email when that model was ready to go. But as soon as it's ready, that's just telling me if I go to my home screen, I can see it. So Utah sample, I'm going to click download, and this will download the model from the cloud to my local machine. As this comes up, I'm going to zoom in. We'll orbit this around. We can see that InfraWorks was able to extract the elevational information. We also have aerial photography. We have several of the roads. If I hover over some of these, in many cases we'll have the attribute information for the roads. We'll see if we have any names on these. East Kenton Drive, 2700 East. So some of that attribute information has come along. This gives us a foundation in the event we didn't have any GIS data. We can see there's some buildings here as well. So we have some of the footprints that were extracted to the height if it was known. So if, in the event I didn't have any GIS data, this gives me a phenomenal starting point where I can take now and use this to make edits, or I can go out and extract the additional existing information that I need such that I have a nice existing environment that I can use to start building my proposed design.